Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Om Janmadyasya Donvayaditaratasartheshu abhijñaswarat Tene Brahma Hrudaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yathā Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mṛhā Dhamna Svena Sada Nirastakohakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. So, yesterday we were seeing this dhyana shabda. The word dhyana does not mean upasana. It means contemplation, nididhyāsanaṃ. Okay? It is not the general meditation as we understand. Okay. What does that mean? What is upasana and what is nididhyāsana? So, the difference between these two should be understood. So he says, nididhyāsanaṃ hi vastusvarūpānapekṣaṃ pratyanantarita śrabdajñāna santati rūpam ātmā vāre draṣṭavyaḥ śrotavyo mantavyo nididhyāsitavyaḥ iti śrutyā tatastu tam paśyate niṣkalaṃ dhyāyamānaḥ iti śrutyā ca ātmasākṣātkāratvena vihitam. Nididhyāsanaṃ hi niṣcayarūpena, definitely. He means definitely. Nididhyāsana definitely is ātmā vastusvarūpānapekṣaṃ. First point is about nididhyāsana. The first point is vastusvarūpānapekṣaṃ. Apeksha, dependent. Svarūpa, nature, inherent nature. Vastu, of the object. Nididhyāsana is dependent upon the inherent nature of the object. But the vastu here is not the worldly object, because with the worldly object you cannot perform the nididhyāsana. So, vastu here means Brahma vastu, Atma vastu. Okay? It is dependent upon the knowledge of the object. Now, that is one. Second point is pratyaya anantarita. It is not interluded by, disturbed by, interrupted by. Anantarita. Antarita means disturbed. Anantarita, non-disturbed. It is not disturbed by pratyaya, different thoughts, the other thoughts, a flow of thought. It is not disturbed by any other thought. Okay. Then, shabdajñāna, third point is shabdajñāna santati rūpam. Shabdajñāna. It is of the form of the knowledge gained through verbal testimony. Okay? Shabdajñāna, that is the important point. Because without Shravana, which is Shabdajñāna, without Shravana, you cannot perform the manana or nididhyāsana. It is impossible. So, the 3 points of nididhyāsana are, it is dependent upon the self. It is a flow without being disturbed. Third, it is gained through the verbal testimony. How do you know this? He says, ātmā vāre draṣṭavyaḥ śrotavyo mantavyo nididhyāsitavyaḥ śrutyā. The Shruti says, ātmā va, by niṣcayarūpena, definitely, oh you, definitely, ātmā should be perceived, should be heard, should be reflected upon, nididhyāsitavyaḥ should be contemplated upon. Okay. Tatastu tam paśyate niṣkalaṃ dhyāyamānaḥ. And what happens if I do nididhyāsana? Tatastu, thereafter, tatahatu, thereafter, definitely, niṣkalaṃ dhyāyamānaḥ, person, one who has pure heart, niṣkalaṃ, without any impurity, dhyāyamānaḥ, when he meditates, when he contemplates on the self, tam paśyate, he sees that. He sees that self. Iti śrutyā ca. With these shrutis, what we understand is we should definitely perform the nididhyāsana. Shravana, along with Shravana, listening, for some people, the manana takes place along with the listening. Some people have to work on it to understand what is taught. So, it can go hand in hand. Manana can go hand in hand or separately, independent of the Shravana, after the Shravana. Okay. Now, but nididhyāsana can only be when you have performed the Shravana and Manana. Because only when there is no doubt, there can be no antara, no interruptions of other thoughts. Because doubt is a thought. When you are meditating upon the self, Oh, is it of this form? Why is so? There is doubt. Doubt interrupts your flow. Therefore, the Shruti says, ātmasākṣātkāratvena vihitam, ātmasākṣātkāratvena vihitam. The Shruti establishes this. Vihitam means establishes this as the means for immediate knowledge of the self. Ātmasākṣātkāra, the immediate knowledge of the self. Upāsanantu. And what is upāsana? There are 3 points in nididhyāsanaṃ. One is it is dependent upon the self, the knowledge of the self. Second is there is a continuous uninterrupted flow. Third is it is dependent upon the verbal testimony. Okay, these are 3 important points of nididhyāsanaṃ. What is upāsana? vastusvarūpānapekṣaṃ, puruṣecchāmātraṃ, tanmānasakriyāpravāharūpam. vastusvarūpānapekṣaṃ, that is dependent. The nididhyāsana is dependent upon the knowledge of the self. Here, there is no dependent upon the knowledge of anything, any object. That is what upasana is. You are not dependent upon the knowledge of the object to meditate upon it. We'll come to this. Okay, that is the first point. Now, why do I not have to depend upon the knowledge of the object? Because when you are asked to meditate upon the God, etc., we'll come to that later. Okay, puruṣecchāmātraṃ tanmānasakriyāṃ, and it is only based on the desire of the person, a mental activity based on the desire of the person. I can meditate on anything in any which way. There is no one to stop me from that. But that is not possible in nididhyāsana. Only whatever Shruti says, in that very form you have to meditate upon. Not meditate, that's contemplation. Okay, that because the Shruti establishes the nature of the self, and that nature of the self is what you are going to perceive. Third is a common. There also there is a flow of thought. Here also there is a flow of thought. In nididhyāsana, when we say there is a flow of thought, it is just for the namesake. Okay, we'll come to that later. Yasya devatāyai havirgṛhītaṃ syāttāṃ dhyāyed vaṣaṭūkariṣyan ityādi. The Shruti says about upasana. Yasya devatāyai havirgṛhītaṃ syāt. For which devata you are taking the havis. Havis is the object, the material for the oblation material, whatever. It's a pounded rice, okay, with boiled water added to it. It's like a pudding. Now, for whatever, it can be rice also, cooked rice also. For whatever devata you have taken this food, oblation material, tam dhyāyed, meditate on that deity. And how do you have to meditate upon? Chanting the name of the God? No, vaṣaṭūkariṣyan. You have to chant vaṣat. Vaṣat is a word which is not used in the world. Therefore, it has no worldly meaning. What does vaṣat means? Vaṣat has no meaning actually, except it is used in the world. Then Veda has a useless word. No, Veda does not have a useless word. This word is a word which is used for application in the karmas. Specific, this is what you have to use in this place. Okay. When you are offering. Okay. So, vaṣaṭūkariṣyan, thinking vaṣat. Okay. Now that is done. But I'm meditating upon the God, deity, some deity. I'm dependent upon that deity, right? But you said, vastusvarūpānapekṣaṃ, not dependent upon the object, is upasana. But this is not upasana because I am dependent upon a deity's form. True, but I am telling you, meditate on Shiva. Immediately, you will meditate with a matted hair. There is water coming out from his head. And third eye, wait, stop there. Is it the form of Shiva? Have you seen Shiva? No. Then how can you say you are dependent upon the form of Shiva? You are meditating on the form of Shiva as prescribed by some. Therefore, there is no dependent upon the exact form of Shiva or Vishnu or whomever that is. Okay, vastusvarūpānapekṣaṃ is there. Okay. Now you want to chant because it says, the Shruti says you have to meditate upon this. You desire to do that karma, so you meditate upon it. There is this desire propelled action also, thought function also. So both are taken care of. Now there is a important point. He says, idañca vastusvarūpānapekṣamapi. Though this upasana is not dependent upon the object, the nature of the object, still tad avirodhi kinchit tad virodhyapi. There are two kinds of upasanas. Some where there is no contradiction with the common knowledge, and where there is a contradiction with the common knowledge, or as accepted. So you are prescribed to meditate upon the deity as prescribed in the Vedas. So there is no virodha there, tad avirodhi. Okay. Though that is not the exact form of the deity, you are meditating upon the deity as prescribed. That's all. Okay. Now there is a contradiction also. Can be contradictory completely, entirely. So he says, yathā vācam dhenu paśyate ityādi. Meditate upon the speech as dhenu, cow. Meditate upon speech as cow. Is there any commonality? Kinchit tad virodhi. That is what is this virodhi. Contradictions. So sometimes you meditate upon non-contradictions, and sometimes you meditate upon the contradictions also. That is what is upasana. Which upasana should I take up for meditating on Brahman? This is the best one. Contradictory or non-contradictory? Non-contradictory. Why? I should have to meditate on Brahman as prescribed, right? So that upasana is better. Contradictory. It should not be object, so I should have to meditate upon something objectless, right? Forget about that. Don't fight over that, because he says, vihitam api upāsanam śrutyā brahmani niṣiddham. Both kinds of upasana, whether contradictory or non-contradictory, are prohibited by Shruti on Brahman. You cannot use this upasana methodology with respect to Brahman. How do you know this? The Shruti says, declares it not once, 4-5 times, continuously. Tadeva brahmattam vidhi nedam medinu upāsate. This is Kena Upanishad. In Kena Upanishad, the first chapter, first canto, it says, yad chakshusha na paśyate yena chakshumchi paśyate tadeva brahmattam vidhi nedam medinu upāsate. Yad manasa na manute yena ahurmanomatam tadeva brahmattam vidhi nedam medinu upāsate. Yad śrotrena śrutam yena śrotram śrunoti tadeva brahmattam vidhi nedam medinu upāsate. So there the commonality is tadeva brahma, that alone is Brahman. Na idam, not this. Yad idam, which this you meditate upon. Idam upāsate, you meditate upon. Meaning this alone is Brahman, and not the one you meditate upon is Brahman. Which alone is Brahman? So for that, the first portion says it negates the common idea that what you meditate upon is. So he says, whatever cannot be seen through the eyes, but whichever sees the eyes is the Brahman, not the one you meditate upon. Whatever cannot be heard, but which is hearing the ears, that is Brahman. Whatever cannot be seen through mind, but which sees the mind, that is Brahman. Okay, so it negates all the sense organ perception of Brahman, and it establishes these sense organs, these perceptions, whatever perception, they are happening because of Brahman existence. If you say I see, that is isness, right? So that existence is because of Brahman. How do you know that? This is what it says. शुद्धगोचरायाः वृत्तेः उपनिषत् मात्र कारणकत्वात् तन्त्व उपनिषदं इत्यादि श्रुतेः तस्या एव वर्त्यमानायाः निदिध्यासनोपत्वाद् युक्तं शुद्धगोचरत्वम्. शुद्धगोचरायाः वृत्तेः. The object we are talking about is the pure self, Brahman. So he says, शुद्धगोचरायाः वृत्तेः. Shuddha means pure. Gocharaya, objectifying, vritti, thought function. The thought function which objectifies the pure, the self, Upanishad matra karanakatvat, can be gained, understood only through the Upanishad. That is why Shabda Jnana, the third word, that is taken care of here. It can be only understood through the Shabda Jnana. How do you know this? Because the Shruti itself declares tantu aupanishadam puruṣam pṛchāmi. Normally that is how they break, but it is actually tantva aupanishadam puruṣam pṛchāmi. Tan, that about that self. Tva, to you. About that aupanishadam puruṣam, that purusha which is explained in the Upanishad, pṛchāmi, I am asking you. I am asking about that self which is gained only through the Upanishads. So it is tantu means definitely that Brahman, that Purusha, which is explained in the Upanishads, I am asking about that. But tantva, I am asking you, the Guru, the disciple goes to the Guru and says, I am asking about you about that self which is explained in the Upanishads. That is proper. Tasyahevavartyamanayaha. When you hear that repeatedly, nididhyāsana when you do it, that continuous focus on that self is nididhyāsana. That is what is contemplation. Yuktam shuddha gocharatam. Therefore, it is objectifying the pure self is properly said here. It's rightly said here. But the point is, though nididhyāsana is said to be a continuous flow of thought, in fact, it is not a continuous flow of thought. There is no doubt. When there is no doubt, this akhandakara vritti which takes place, that does not go on repeating itself, because the akhandakara vritti takes care of itself and the others. It is like, that is why I always say akhandakara vritti is like a human bomb. It destroys everything around and itself. Okay, so etavan matra paryavasanacha sarva. How can you say? It says, avartyamana, you should have to repeat it. Wait, next point. Etavan matra paryavasanacha. With this paryavasana, everything ends. Everything ends means what? What does everything means? Sarva sadhana vihitam. All the injunctions pertaining to the performance of karmas. Karma, upasana, tapas, dana, whatever it may be, they all come to an end here once that nididhyāsana takes place. That is why the Shruti says, tatra ko vidhi ko nishedaha. Where is there prohibition or injunction for him? You should do, you should not do, nothing can function for the realist. But this is an auspicious one. The self is the auspicious one. How do you know this? So he says, Yatasya cha mangalatvam sarvada sarvakaryeshu nasti tesham mangalam esham hridistha bhagavan mangalayatano hari ityādi shastra siddham. This is Skanda Purana statement. It says, sarvada, this is auspicious. This Brahman is auspicious. How do you know this? It says, sarvada sarvakaryeshu nasti tesham amangalam esham hridistha bhagavan mangala ayatanaha hari. Sarvada, always, sarvakaryeshu, in all the activities, tesham nasti amangalam, there is no inauspiciousness for them. For whom? Esham, for whom, hridistha, hridayastitha, in their heart exists, who? Bhagavan. The Bhagavan exists in whose heart, for them, there is no inauspicious. But who is this Bhagavan? Harihi. The Hari, Bhagavan Hari, when he resides in the heart, for them there is no problem. Why? Because Bhagavan is Hari is Mangala Ayatana, Mangala Swarupa. He is of the nature of auspiciousness. Now, again, Harihi here does not mean the Saguna Brahman. It is not the attributed self. Though people want to interpret it as attributed self, we should not fall in that pit, because we are seeing this Hari or Krishna as an unattributed self. So here, Harihi, the absolute self, the unattributed self, in whose heart it resides, it exists. When there is nothing other than the auspicious self, how can there be inauspiciousness? So that is what Harihi, Hriyate Yoginam Hridayah is Harihi. Ityādi Shastra Siddham. Okay. But how do you tie that on this? Harihi means Vishnu, right? Evam Shuddhasya Brahmano nididhyāsyamanasya paramarthastitāṃ uvādetum tat padarthasvarūpātāṃ. So we already said it should be gained through Shabda Jnana. So what is the nature of that self? To establish that paramarthatyataṃ upāpādayatum tat padarthasvarūpātāṃ. Tat padarthasvarūpātāṃ. Establishing the nature of that self. For what? To establish paramarthatyataṃ, to establish it is the absolute truth. For whom? Nididhyāsanaṃ, for the one who desires to meditate upon, contemplate upon it. In what? Shuddhasya Brahma, in the pure self. So, for the one who wants to meditate upon the pure self, who wants to contemplate upon the pure self, to establish that pure self is the absolute truth, this inherent nature of that pure self is established with janmadhyasya yathā ityādina, with janmadhyasya yathā, etc. We already said janmadhyasya yathā is the second sutra in Brahma Sutra with 3 words: janmadi asya yathā. Okay, those 3 words are explained here. Asya means pratyakshādi sakala pramana sannidhāpitasya jagatah. Janmadi janma sthiti bhangaha yato bhavati iti tam satyam param dhimahi iti sambandha. No. Asya means for this means simply jagat. Asya jagatah. Simple. Over. What do you call as jagat? So for that he is establishing the means through which you understand the jagat. Pratyakshādi sakala pramana sannidhāpitasya. That which sannidhāpita means that which is presented to you by the pratyaksha, direct perception, etc. All the valid proofs. Whatever is presented to you as real object, real knowledge, that is what we are talking about as a jagat. Okay. Now, janmadi. Janmadi means janma adi. Adi, etc. Janma, etc. Janma, etc. means janma sthiti bhangam. Janma, creation. Sthiti, sustenance. Bhanga normally means destruction. Here, dissolution. Because once this this disappears, this is destroyed. What happens to this creation? It merges in the cause. And superimposed cannot be destroyed. The bhanga word, though it's a beautiful word used for destruction, it is not pure destruction. It is dissolution, because there is no creation at the beginning. So how can there be a destruction? Yathā, from which, fifth case, from which bhavati, from which it takes place, from which the creation, sustenance and dissolution happens of the jagat. That is what is the self. Tam satyam dhimahi. That is what we understand as the pure self, as the truth, absolute truth. How do you know this? Tatastu shruti. The shruti establishes this. Where yato va imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanti visamshanti ityādi. Anando brahmeti dvijanat anandat vaikhalpimani bhutani jayante ityādya jagat janma siddhi laya karanatam brahmano darshyati. Laya karanatam, he is making it clear here. So he is bringing the Taittiriya Upanishad. Yato va imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanti abhivishanti. Yathā, from which, fifth case, from which imani bhutani, these beings jayante, come into existence. Yena, third case, into which, because of which jatani, that which is born, jivanti, is sustained. They are sustained. Yet prayanti, after merging, after destroying, after destruction, abhivishanti. Into which, yed abhivishanti, into which it merged. Okay, from which they came into existence, because of which it is sustained, into which they merge. That is what is the self. Because this is Taittiriya Upanishad, 3rd canto, Bhrigu, where the Bhrigu disciple, he goes to his father, Varuna, and asks him, please teach me what Brahman is. Adi bhago brahmeti, please, sir, teach me what the self is. For that, he gives this, yato va imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayanti visamshanti, tad vijijñāsasva, desire to know that, tad brahmeti, that is what is Brahman. Desire to know, vijijñāsasva. He comes with the desire, but his father, the guru, he tells, desire to know. See, what is the stupidity? If you inquire into it, it's a stupid statement by the father. Desire to know that. I come to you because of the desire. Why do you say desire to know that? Because you start with the proper desire, but you branch out. That is why yesterday also he had to say, I am doing this text to keep the mind established in this. Right? So he says, Yato, that is what is Brahman. Okay. Now, that is complete. That Brahman, that is what is Brahman. Over. But he is bringing another statement to support from the same Taittiriya Upanishad, Bhrigu. Anando brahmeti vyajanat, he understood Ananda as the Brahman. Because from the Ananda, by definitely from the Ananda, Khalu, indeed, imani bhutani jayante, all these beings come into existence. Anandena jatani jivanti. Because of the Ananda, everything is sustained. Anandam prayanti visamshanti. After getting destroyed, they merge in the Ananda. Okay. Now, this is an important point. For though the first statement, Yatova Iman itself establishes the Brahman is the cause for Janmadi. That is established. But to say this is important. It is reiteration of the same idea. Why? Because after Yatova, the guru, the father, he says Yatova Imani, from which all these come into existence. This fellow, he goes on to meditate. He says, Tapo tapyata, go and do meditation. So he goes and does penance, meditating on this idea, this knowledge, and comes back understanding what annam brahmeti vyajanat. He understood annam is the food, is the Brahman. Why? Because you said from which being comes into existence, because of which they are sustained, and into which they merge. Naturally, food. We eat food. We are sustained by food. And we are born of food, we are sustained by food, and we become food. Good, proper. Then his father again says, go and meditate. He comes back. I understood what you said. Prana. The prana is that the air which exists everywhere, because of which if I inhale, I exist. The first inhalation, I start becoming existence. And because of prana, inhaling and exhaling, I get sustained. And at the end, when I leave the prana, I die. So prana is. Then mind, then vijnana. Finally, when he comes and meditates upon, he understands Anandam Brahma. He understands that the bliss is Brahman. He does not go back. He understands that. That is why this Anando Brahma is a reiterating point for Yatova Imani Bhutani. To establish the Janmadi, the Srishti, creation, etc. are by this yathā, this self. Okay. Ityādi. Janma Sthiti Laya Karanatam Brahmano Darshayati. So the Brahman is the cause for creation, sustenance, and dissolution of all this. That is established. We will see this. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.